Hello and welcome to the Peluso Presents podcast for the week of June 3rd, 2024. Welcome to summer, everybody. My name is Mike Peluso. I am your host. This is episode number 246, and the title of this week's episode and the title of our post of the week is Why You Need a Cigarette Break Even When You Don't Smoke. So the story, and I go into this in our article today, the story of today's article started when I went on a cruise by myself and I made a bunch of friends, and those friends happened to be smokers. And I realized, looking back at my life, a couple different instances, but I highlight one specifically in the article, where smoking has become something that is very powerful for networking. It's very powerful for human connection. Unfortunately, it has some really negative downsides. So we always look at the negative side of smoking. We rarely look at the positive side of smoking. And there is some really strong, powerful positives with smoking. And I mean traditional smoking with a cigarette, I guess with a pipe or pot or whatever. But actual smoking, burning leaves, carcinogens, all that. There are some positives for human connection. You don't seem to get them as much with vaping. You don't seem to get them as much with chewing nicotine gum or any other way. It's not about the chemical. It's about the process, and it's about the community. And what made me want to write this article was the fact that when I thought about it, I realized there was no parallel. There was nothing else that actually matched the benefits of smoking. Now, of course, there's nothing else that matches the negatives as well. And I really just wanted to kind of get this out there. So that's why I think this is a good article. It's looking at something that society has deemed bad, but looking at some of the good parts of it. And then maybe figuring out what are those good parts. And I don't really go into this in the article, but how can we adopt other things in our lives to have those good parts so that we can make those connections and so that we can have that downtime and we can have the benefits, not necessarily chemical benefits, but the social and the engagement benefits that smoking uniquely brings right now. And you can hear all of the pros of smoking, because we've all heard the cons, but you can hear the pros in our post of the week. Why you need a cigarette break even when you don't smoke. I don't smoke, but I'm always amazed how surprisingly positive an experience it is to hang with smokers. My first boss, the late Bill Knopf, was a smoker. We worked in sales at Transpo, a manufacturer of car parts. Bill, like many of the other sales guys, smoked regularly. They used to walk outside and smoke by the back door. The company, ran by an autocratic and clinically bipolar entrepreneur, decided they wanted to eliminate smoking. To discourage the smoking, management created a no smoking on property policy, forcing the smokers to walk across the street to get their nicotine fix. The aforementioned autocratic and bipolar owner didn't like smoking because all he ever wanted to see salespeople do was make calls. His short-sighted opinion was that smoking was time stolen from the company. In reality, it was stress release, team building, information sharing, and strategy sessions. That was 30 years ago, and it's still true today. I was recently reminded of that on one of my vacations. I went on a cruise. Actually, I've been on a bunch of them, but this one was very different. I went solo, all by myself. I wanted to try something new. Also, I'm a ship nerd. I see them as the world's biggest gadgets. I also wanted to see this particular ship and how this particular line, a European brand, was different. You can watch all the videos on YouTube, but it's never even close to the experience of being there. In addition, I wanted to experience the company's private island. I could write several articles about the industry, and in fact, I have. I had a small window to go at a price I could afford and nobody else was available. So I bit the bullet and booked the trip. Still, I'm a social guy and I was feeling some anxiety about being alone. I figured I'd make friends by being active on That Sailing's Facebook group. Yes, there's a Facebook group for virtually every single sailing on every single cruise ship. In short order, I was made an admin and helped coordinate and lead a couple of events. I made some acquaintances on the ship, but ultimately, the people I thought I'd hang with, I didn't. There was one Facebook friend who was a smoker. At some point, while walking with her, we were led to the back of the ship by another smoker. The bar at the back of the ship was one of the locations where smoking was allowed. I hung out that afternoon, and even though I'm not a smoker, I went back the next day and the next. I chatted, laughed, and connected with others who were there smoking. The social interaction helped create a bond with a couple of new, longer-term friends. Even not being a smoker, I became part of the smoking community. This whole experience reminded me of the days back at Transpo, and ultimately it made me think about the power of smoking as a community builder. I wondered why smoking is so powerful as a human connector. I decided there were a couple of core but somewhat unpleasant reasons. The first is simple addiction. The second is that the activity is shunned by most of society who's not addicted. Since it's an addiction, people are actively drawn to it. If the environment is like my old workplace, the same people are drawn to the same location at virtually the same time of day. This creates regular interactions, and those interactions, over time, create bonds. If the environment is like a cruise or some other leisurely pursuit, then people just hang out or lounge smoking. That was the key. I was hanging out with the smokers who were just sitting out back, smoking and drinking all day. Smoking isn't an instant thing. It takes a little time. Even the quickest cigarette takes several minutes to smoke, and smokers typically try to get a few in during a break. So if you're smoking, you're also hanging out and talking. You're connecting. This may be why smoking was so important of an activity to Native Americans. I'd like to have much more of this level of connection in my life, but I'm not a smoker. I do enjoy a cold beer. That being said, it's rare that you see the same outcome out of drinkers like you do smokers. I wondered why I can't build the same sort of community when I'm drinking. There are many similar elements, but it doesn't come to the same end. With smoking, it's little breaks all day, even during work, and the smoking area is usually something you can walk to. With drinking, you can mostly only do it at night, and to be social, you have to go to bars. Drinking also impairs your judgment where smoking does not. So it seems like the same thing, but it's not. Of course, if you aren't already hooked on smoking, you don't want to start because of all of the issues related to cancer. It's a shame that smoking is so connected to cancer. Cancer is really bad, probably one of the worst things in human existence. It could be argued that cancer is why virtually all of society has concluded that smoking is really bad. If we could figure out how to have smoking without the cancer and other issues like the smell, in theory, smoking could go back to being socially acceptable. To that point, I'd say we figured that problem out with vaping. It's basically smoke, but without the carcinogens, and it seems to me that it is a bit more socially acceptable. Vaping, at least for now, can happen indoors and is more readily accepted in other public areas. It doesn't have as much of a socially negative connotation, and perhaps, more importantly for this conversation, it doesn't smell bad. This means it's not as powerful of a community-building activity. If you can pop out a vape in a building and take a few puffs and nobody is the wiser, then where is the motivation to walk across the street and hang out with the other shunned vapors? If you're not hanging out, then there is no community. Still, vaping isn't as socially accepted as you would think it could be. The vaping industry would argue it's not the nicotine that's the problem, it's the hundreds of other chemicals inhaled in a burning chemical reaction that causes cancer. Even if the vaping industry is right about cancer, any form of addiction is bad and nicotine is certainly addictive. Society in general doesn't like addiction, hence society doesn't like vaping. When you put it all together, smoking still seems to be unparalleled at community building. To that end, I wound up coming to the unlikely conclusion that it's beneficial to hang out with the smokers. I'm not suggesting anyone pick up smoking as a habit so you can go hang out. It's also not always possible. It's simply awkward if you're going to the corner where they are standing for a quick smoke like back in my transpo days. It's much less awkward if you're sitting on the smoking side of the bar or on the back of the ship. You don't have to smoke to enjoy the sun, the view of the ocean, and the drinks. You can sit for hours and bond with the smokers. Going back to the cancer conversation, there are obviously issues with secondhand smoke, but I find that as a universal courtesy, smokers try and keep it away from any non-smokers in the area. This mitigates the issues related to secondhand smoke a little. If you hang out with smokers, I think the time you spend there will be well spent. You'll learn things. You'll make friends and professional connections. Smokers are a small group of people who, through life's journey, got hooked on a substance that the rest of society decided is bad. But people, for the most part, are not bad. I like people. More often than not, they bring value to my life, even if they have an expensive and mostly shunned habit. So I'm going to keep hanging out with smokers where I can. I think it's definitely worth it. That's true, even if one of the prices I have to pay is the regular need to wash the smell of smoke out of my clothing. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Peluso Presents podcast. You can follow the Peluso Presents efforts via Twitter @PelusoPresents, on Facebook, on Medium.com, just search for Mike Peluso, on LinkedIn, and of course on the blog located at www.pelusopresents.com. You can email us directly via peluso@outlook.com. This podcast is available on all major podcast services, including iTunes, Google Play Music, or your podcast service of choice. We love and appreciate any comments and reviews you wish to leave. Please remember to support this effort by sharing and liking the postings on all your social media. If you'd like to support this effort more directly, you can via patreon.com/Peluso Presents. Thank you for listening, following, sharing, and for your support. We appreciate it.